The sun was sinking low over the open frontier, painting the wide land in shades of gold and dust. The wind moved slowly across the dry grass, carrying the smell of earth and hardship. This was a land that showed no kindness, a place where only the strong survived. On a lonely stretch of land stood a small ranch, weathered by time and struggle. It belonged to a rancher who lived alone, a man shaped by loss and silence. He rose before dawn each day and worked until the sky grew dark, asking nothing from the world except the chance to survive another day. People in nearby towns knew him as a quiet man, distant and cold, someone who kept his past locked away like a secret buried deep in the soil. The rancher had once dreamed of a different life, but the Wild West had a way of destroying dreams. Years ago, love had visited his life, only to leave him broken and empty. Since then, he trusted no one. His ranch was not just his home. It was his shield against the world. The fence lines marked more than land, they marked the borders of his heart. As night approached, he finished his work and turned toward the house, unaware that fate was already walking toward him. From the far end of the dusty road came a woman, her steps slow and uncertain. She was thin, her dress worn and torn from long travel. Dust clung to her skin, and her eyes held both fear and determination. She had walked for days under the burning sun, chased by hunger, danger, and memories she wished to forget. Every step forward was an act of survival. She had heard of this ranch from whispers in a broken town, a place where a man lived alone and kept to himself. It was her last hope. When she reached the gate, her legs nearly gave out. She leaned against the wooden post, breathing hard. The rancher noticed movement and froze. Visitors were rare, and strangers often brought trouble. His hand moved toward his gun, not in anger, but in caution. The woman raised her hand slowly, showing she meant no harm. She looked at him with tired eyes, eyes that had seen too much. For someone so young. She told him her story in a quiet voice, broken by exhaustion. She had no family left, no home, and no protection. The Wild West had been cruel to her, taking everything she once had. Men had tried to use her, towns had turned her away, and hunger had followed her like a shadow. She did not ask for pity. She only asked for a chance to live. The rancher listened in silence, his face unreadable, but his heart stirred in ways he did not expect. Then she said the words that shocked him. She told him she would stay, work, and give him children if he would give her shelter and safety. There was no romance in her voice, only honesty and desperation. To her, this was not love, it was survival. The rancher felt the weight of her words press heavily on his chest. He had lived so long without hope that he no longer knew what to do with it. He studied her face, searching for lies, but found none. He saw a woman pushed to the edge, standing tall despite the world's cruelty. Memories of his own loneliness returned, sharp and painful. He knew the risks of letting someone into his life, yet he also knew what it meant to turn someone away in a land like this. The silence between them stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the sound of the wind. Finally, he stepped aside and opened the gate. It was not a promise of love, only a promise of shelter. The woman walked onto the ranch, unsure of what awaited her, but grateful to still be alive. As darkness settled over the frontier, two broken lives crossed paths under the vast western sky, bound by desperation and unspoken hope. Neither of them knew that this meeting would change their lives forever, but the land itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would come next. The rancher stood alone near the fence as the night grew quiet, the stars spreading across the wide sky like distant fires. The woman rested inside the small house, finally asleep after days of fear and hunger. He could hear the soft sound of the wind and the animals settling down, but his mind refused to rest. Her arrival had stirred memories he had spent years trying to bury. The past, like the desert, never truly let go. Long before the ranch became his prison and his shelter, the rancher had been a different man. He was once hopeful, full of plans, and believed the land could give more than it took. He had loved a woman deeply, building dreams of family and peace on the same soil that now felt so cold. Together, they worked the land, trusting that hard work and love would be enough to survive the Wild West. For a time it was. Then sickness came, quiet and unforgiving. Doctors were far away, and medicine was scarce. He watched helplessly as the woman he loved grew weaker each day. The land that once fed them now offered no mercy. When she died, she took the warmth from his life with her. The rancher buried her under a lone tree, promising himself he would never allow his heart to suffer like that again. After her death, people changed toward him. Some felt pity, others saw weakness. Business partners cheated him, neighbors turned distant, and trust became a dangerous thing. Every loss hardened him, shaping him into the silent man he had become. He learned that loneliness hurt less than hope. The ranch became his world, and the world beyond it no longer mattered. Years passed in this way. Each sunrise brought work, each sunset brought silence. He spoke little, not because he had nothing to say, but because words reminded him of everything he had lost. The past followed him in every corner of the ranch, in the empty chair at the table, in the untouched side of the bed, in the quiet evenings where only memories kept him company. Now with a stranger sleeping under his roof, those memories refused to stay quiet. The woman's voice, her tired eyes, and her bold offer had cracked something inside him. He did not want to care, yet he could not ignore the fear that she might suffer the same fate as the one he had loved before. The Wild West was cruel to women, and even crueler to those who dared to hope. He questioned his decision again and again. Had he made a mistake by letting her stay? Was he strong enough to protect her, or would he fail her like he had failed before? The thought of another grave on his land filled him with dread. Yet the idea of turning her away into the darkness felt even worse. As dawn approached, the rancher sat on the porch, watching the sky slowly change color. He realized that his life had been frozen in grief for too long. The woman inside did not know his past, and he did not intend to share it. Trust, he believed, was earned through time, not words. When morning came, he spoke to her only about work. He showed her where the water was, how to feed the animals, and which areas of the land to avoid. His tone was firm but fair, keeping his distance. The woman accepted everything without complaint. She worked hard, her hands roughened by labor, her face calm despite exhaustion. Watching her, the rancher felt something unfamiliar: respect. She did not demand kindness, nor did she expect comfort. Like him, she understood survival. This made her different from anyone he had known before. Still, the rancher reminded himself that this was only an arrangement. No matter how the past whispered to him, he would not let his heart lead him again. Yet deep inside, buried beneath years of pain, something began to shift. The past had shaped him, but for the first time, it did not fully control him. As the sun climbed higher, the rancher turned back to his work, unaware that the hardest battle ahead would not be against the land or the world, but against the walls he had built around his own heart. Morning came quietly to the ranch, carried in by a soft breeze and the sound of animals waking for the day. The land stretched wide and empty, as if nothing had changed, yet everything felt different. Two people now shared the same space, bound not by love or law, but by an unspoken agreement. No words had been written, no promises spoken aloud. What existed between them was a deal formed in silence. The rancher woke before sunrise, as he always did. Habit ruled his life. He stepped outside and began his work, feeding the animals and checking the fences. The woman soon followed, unsure of where she stood or what was expected of her. She waited for instructions, her hands folded, her eyes alert. She knew this place was her last chance, and she would not waste it. He showed her the work without kindness or cruelty, only facts. Milk the cows, carry water, clean the tools, prepare simple meals. The work was hard, but familiar in its purpose. She nodded and began without complaint. Each task she completed felt like a step away from the fear that had followed her for so long. They spoke little. Silence filled the space between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Words were risky in a world where promises often broke. The rancher watched her closely, not with suspicion, but with caution shaped by years of disappointment. He expected weakness, yet she showed none. Her movements were steady, her will unbroken. As days passed, the routine settled in. Sunrise brought labor, midday brought exhaustion, and night brought quiet rest. The woman slept in a small room near the kitchen, grateful for a roof and safety. She did not ask for more. She did not push for affection or comfort. She understood that survival came before everything else. The rancher noticed small things. She fixed broken tools without being asked. She spoke gently to the animals. She conserved food, never wasting a single piece. These actions spoke louder than words. Slowly, trust began to grow, not as emotion, but as respect. Still, the deal weighed heavily on both of them. The woman carried the burden of her choice. She knew what she had offered and why. It was not a dream, but a sacrifice. In the Wild West, women often traded youth and strength for safety. She had chosen her path carefully, even if it cost her pride. The rancher, too, felt the weight of the arrangement. He never spoke of children or the future. He told himself this was only practical. Yet at night, when the house grew quiet, doubt crept in. He wondered if he had crossed a line he could never return from. One evening, a storm rolled in without warning. Thunder cracked across the sky, and rain poured down hard. The woman struggled to secure the animals, slipping in the mud. Without thinking, the rancher ran to help her. For a brief moment, their hands touched as they pulled a gate closed. The contact was short, but powerful. Neither spoke, yet both felt it. That night, they shared a simple meal in silence. The storm passed, leaving the land soaked and shining under the moonlight. The rancher noticed the exhaustion on her face, the strength behind her tired eyes. She noticed his concern, hidden beneath his rough manner. The deal remained unspoken, but it had begun to change. It was no longer just survival, it was shared responsibility. Two lives moving side by side, learning the rhythm of each other's presence. As the fire burned low, the woman realized something important. She was no longer afraid of tomorrow. For the first time in a long while, she felt steady ground beneath her feet. The rancher, sitting across from her, felt something just as unsettling, a quiet sense of belonging he had not felt in years. Neither of them knew where this silent agreement would lead. But in the vast and unforgiving Wild West, they had formed something rare, a fragile bond built not on words, but on endurance, respect, and shared survival. The days on the ranch grew longer and heavier as the season changed. The sun rose hotter each morning, and the land began to dry under its burning light. Water became precious, grass turned yellow, and the animals grew restless. Life on the frontier was never gentle, and now it seemed determined to test every soul that lived upon it. For the rancher and the woman, survival was no longer just about routine, it was about endurance. The woman worked from dawn until her body ached. Her hands became rough and cracked, her back stiff with pain, yet she never complained. Each chore was a reminder of why she had come and what she had risked. She carried water from the well, cooked simple meals, mended torn clothes, and helped tend to the animals. At night, exhaustion pulled her into deep sleep, leaving little room for fear or doubt. The rancher watched the land closely. He had lived through hard seasons before and knew the signs of trouble. The well ran lower each day, and the cattle grew thinner. He repaired fences, searched for grazing land, and counted supplies with careful eyes. He did not speak much, but his concern showed in his movements. The land was his responsibility, and now so was the woman who lived on it. As the weeks passed, outside dangers began to creep closer. Travelers passed by less often, and when they did, they brought troubling news. Drought had driven desperate men from their homes. Theft and violence were spreading across the frontier. A lone ranch was an easy target, and both of them knew it. One night, they heard distant gunshots carried by the wind. The sound echoed across the open land, sharp and warning. The woman felt fear tighten her chest, memories of past dangers rising. Like shadows, the rancher checked his rifle and stood guard until morning. He said nothing, but his presence brought her a quiet sense of safety. Hardship began to change them. The silence between them no longer felt empty. It became a shared space, filled with understanding. When the woman struggled with a task, the rancher helped without being asked. When he grew tired, she brought him water or food without a word. They did not speak of gratitude, but it existed in every small act. Sickness came quietly one evening. The woman collapsed while working, her body weakened by exhaustion and heat. The rancher carried her inside, his heart pounding with a fear he had sworn never to feel again. He cooled her fever, stayed by her side, and watched through the night. Memories of loss haunted him, but this time he refused to turn away. By morning, her fever broke. When she opened her eyes and saw him there, something changed between them. No deal, no agreement, just human care. She thanked him softly, and he nodded, unable to find the right words. From that day on they worked more carefully. He eased her burden, and she learned to pace herself. The land remained harsh, but together they faced it with greater strength. The rancher realized that survival was easier when shared. The woman realized she was no longer alone in her fight. As the sun set one evening, painting the sky red and gold, they stood side by side watching the land. The future was uncertain, filled with danger and struggle, but for the first time, it did not feel impossible. The Wild West continued to test them, but through hardship, something solid was forming, something stronger than fear. The change came slowly, so quietly that neither of them noticed it at first. Life on the ranch continued as always, filled with work, silence, and survival, yet something unseen had shifted. What began as an arrangement had grown into something deeper, though neither the rancher nor the woman had planned for it. In the Wild West, love was a dangerous thing, and both of them had learned to be careful with their hearts. The woman woke each morning with a sense of purpose she had not felt. In years, the ranch was no longer just a place of safety. It had become a place where she belonged. She knew every corner of the land now, every animal by name, every creak of the house at night. Her hands worked with confidence, and her steps carried strength instead of fear. Slowly, her smile returned, small and cautious but real. The rancher noticed these changes, even though he pretended not to. He watched her laugh softly at the animals, speak gently to the land, and face hardship without breaking. He admired her strength, though he never said it aloud. Each day, he found himself thinking about her safety before his own. When she was late returning from a task, worry tightened his chest in a way he did not understand. They began to share small moments, quiet meals, brief conversations, shared glances that said more than words. The silence between them was no longer a wall, but a bridge. At night, the rancher found it harder to sleep, his thoughts filled with her presence in the house. The woman, too, felt the change. She no longer feared his distance. Instead, she respected it, knowing he carried wounds deeper than he showed. One evening, a wounded horse returned to the ranch, limping and bleeding. Without hesitation, they worked together to save it. Their hands moved in harmony, trust flowing naturally between them. When the horse finally rested, safe and calm, they shared a long look, both aware that what bound them now was more than survival. The woman realized that her feelings had changed when she felt fear at the thought of losing him. What had started as a promise made out of desperation had turned into care, respect, and something dangerously close to love. She struggled with these emotions, unsure if she had the right to feel them. In the Wild West, love often ended in loss. The rancher fought his feelings just as hard. He reminded himself of his past, of promises broken by fate and land alike. Yet each time he tried to push her away, something pulled him back. Her presence brought warmth to a life that had been cold for too long. He began to imagine a future he had once sworn off of: family, laughter, and a home filled with life. The truth finally surfaced one quiet night. A storm rattled the house, and fear returned like an old enemy. The woman sat by the fire, trembling, and the rancher placed a blanket around her shoulders. The touch lingered longer than necessary. Neither spoke, but the moment said everything. They did not make grand promises. There were no words of love spoken, no vows exchanged. What passed between them was honest and real. In that moment, both understood that their bond had grown beyond any deal or agreement. They had chosen each other without meaning to. As the storm faded and the fire burned low, the rancher realized something important. Love had not weakened. It had made him stronger. The woman realized she was no longer surviving alone. Together, they faced the uncertain future of the Wild West, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. Love had found them in the harshest land, in the most unexpected way, and neither of them could turn away from it anymore. Trouble did not arrive loudly. It came the way it often did in the Wild West: slow, quiet, and full of danger. The land seemed restless, as if it sensed what was coming. Birds flew off suddenly, and the animals grew uneasy. The rancher noticed these signs and felt a familiar tension tighten in his chest. The past, he knew, had a way of finding people no matter how far they ran. It began with tracks near the far fence. Fresh horse prints where none should have been. The rancher studied the ground carefully, his jaw tightening. He said nothing to the woman, but his movements became sharper, more alert. He kept his rifle close and scanned the horizon more often. The woman felt the change and understood without asking. Survival had taught her to read danger in silence. A few days later, strangers appeared on the road. 3 men on horseback, rough-looking and well-armed, riding with confidence that did not belong to honest travelers. They stopped near the ranch, their eyes cold and searching. The rancher stood his ground, calm but ready. The woman watched. From a distance, fear rising like a storm inside her. One of the men smiled when he saw her. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who believed he owned something. Her blood ran cold. She recognized him instantly. He was part of the life she had escaped, the men who had hunted her, used her, and treated her as property. She had thought she had left that life behind, but the Wild West never forgot. The man spoke her name, loud and clear. He claimed she belonged to him, that she had run away and owed him. The words cut deep, pulling her back into memories filled with pain and fear. She froze, unable to speak. The rancher stepped forward, placing himself between her and the men. He told them she was under his protection now. His voice was steady, but the threat beneath it was clear. The men laughed. They mocked him, calling him a fool for risking his life over a woman. In the Wild West, such risks often ended in blood. The leader warned him, walk away or pay the price. The rancher did not move. He had lost too much in his life already. He would not lose her. The men rode off, but not before promising they would return. Their words hung in the air long after they were gone. The woman finally spoke, her voice shaking as she told the rancher the truth about her past. She expected anger or regret. Instead, he listened quietly. When she finished, he told her something she did not expect. her past did not define her here. This ranch was her home now. His words brought her both comfort and fear. She did not want her past to destroy the life they had built. That night, neither of them slept. The rancher prepared for what was coming. He checked his weapons, reinforced the house, and planned escape routes if needed. The woman helped, refusing to hide. Fear still lived inside her, but so did determination. She would not run again. Days passed in tense silence. Every sound felt like danger. Every shadow seemed alive. The rancher knew the men would return. Men like them always did. They believed strength gave them the right to take whatever they wanted. When they came back, it was at dawn. Dust rose as horses charged toward the ranch. The rancher stood ready, his heart steady, his purpose clear. He was no longer fighting just for land or survival, he was fighting for family. The woman stood behind him, fear in her eyes but trust in her heart. Whatever happened next would change their lives forever. The past had come to claim her, but this time it would not take her without a fight. As the first gunshot echoed across the land, the Wild West held its breath, waiting to see who would survive the truth of their past and the strength of their bond. The first gunshot shattered the quiet morning, echoing across the open land like a warning from the earth itself. Birds burst into the sky, and the animals cried out in fear. Dust rose as horses thundered forward, carrying men who believed fear. And violence gave them power. The rancher stood firm near the house, his rifle steady, his eyes clear. He had faced danger before, but never with so much at stake. The woman remained just behind him, her heart racing. Every part of her wanted to run, to disappear like she had so many times before. But she did not move. This time was different. This time she was not alone. She watched the rancher with a mix of fear and pride, knowing he was standing there not because he had to, but because he chose to. The men spread out, trying to surround the ranch. They shouted threats, calling her by her past name, trying to break her spirit before breaking her body. The words hurt, but she forced herself to stand tall. She would not let them see her fear again. The rancher fired a warning shot into the ground, his voice calm but powerful as he told them to leave. The leader laughed and raised his gun. In that moment, there was no more talk, only survival. Gunfire erupted. The sound was deafening, sharp and unforgiving. The rancher moved with purpose, using the land he knew so well. He took cover behind fences, fired with care, and never wasted a bullet. This was not rage driving him, but resolve. Every shot was meant to protect what was his. One of the men fell, wounded and screaming. Another tried to circle the house. But the woman saw him first. Without thinking, she grabbed a rifle the rancher had left nearby. Her hands shook, but her aim was true enough to stop him. The sound of her shot stunned everyone, including herself. She had crossed a line she could never step back from, but she felt no regret. The fight dragged on, each second heavy with danger. The rancher was grazed by a bullet, blood soaking into his sleeve, but he did not slow down. Pain meant nothing compared to loss. He pushed forward, forcing the men back, breaking their confidence piece by piece. Finally, the leader stood alone. His arrogance was gone, replaced by fear. He tried to retreat, but the rancher stopped him, his rifle aimed straight and steady. He told the man this land was not his, and neither was the woman. The Wild West had enough cruelty already. The man dropped his gun and fled, disappearing into the open land. Silence returned slowly, broken only by heavy breathing and the distant wind. The fight was over. The woman ran to the rancher, helping him sit as the strength left his body. She pressed her hands against his wound, tears falling freely now that the danger had passed. He looked at her and smiled faintly, a look filled with relief and something deeper love without doubt. They survived, but the cost was clear. Blood stained the ground, and the land would remember this day. Yet something else remained too: truth. They had fought not just against men, but against fear, against the past, against the belief that they were alone. As the sun climbed higher, the ranch stood quiet again. The animals slowly returned, the land breathing once more. The woman helped the rancher inside, her movements gentle and sure. She was no longer a guest, no longer protected only by a deal. She was family. That day marked the end of running and the beginning of belonging. In the harsh and unforgiving Wild West, they had chosen each other openly, without fear. And whatever the future held, they would face it together, bound by blood, courage, and a love strong enough to survive the fight.